The Dutch driver continues his domination of Formula One. New year, but no new winner. Max Verstappen.
So, you just watched Max Verstappen win the Bahrain Grand Prix by 22 seconds, and you're wondering, is 2024 just going to be a repeat of last year? Could Max actually do the impossible and win all 24 races this year? In terms of competition this weekend, there was no competition. Max drove a Grand Slam. Pole position, led every lap, fastest lap, win. Is this an indication of the season to come? Or could the season actually be closer than it seems right now? Let's take a look. As with everything in Formula 1, caveat, no one can read the future. If you had told me at the end of last season that Christian Horner might be about to resign, I would have said that sounded ludicrous. And yet, since then, of course, allegations. This sport is crazy. Weird things happen. There's every chance that something completely left field will come along to make Max and Red Bull uncompetitive. But for now, at least, they look very competitive. And so the question remains, will Max dominate again in 2024? There's three things we can look at to help us answer that question. Did pre-season testing show that any other teams are getting closer? How did Bahrain 2024 compare to Bahrain 2023? And finally, we can look at the long-term performance trends of each team, because as much as people like to believe that teams can jump the whole way up the grid order with a new front wing or something like that, performance trends in Formula 1 actually happen a lot more slowly, with teams moving up or down over a course of months, if not full seasons. So firstly, the dark art that is figuring out pre-season testing. Every pundit and media organisation likes to claim that they have it all figured out. Most of the time, they haven't. After testing in 2020, the experts, their words not mine, at Formula1.com itself claimed that Ferrari was the third quickest team on the grid. Let's see, how did that prediction pan out? Oh, really bad. So, is there anything we can work out from testing? As we know, lap times mean nothing. The three fastest teams with the three fastest lap times this year were Ferrari, Mercedes, and Sauber. Are they the three quickest teams? Double Q1 exit says no. However, total laps completed does tell us a thing or two about the stability of each team. Every team turns up with a plan of what they're going to do throughout the 3 days of testing, and normally that plan involves doing as many laps as possible. If a team has a high total mileage, that normally means they did everything they planned to do without any parts breaking and without any surprises. Promising stuff. Teams with the most laps this year were Haas, and bear in mind when I say stability, consistently slow is still consistent. There we go. Ferrari, who actually did the exact same number of laps as last year, which kind of indicates that they have the same run plan and they did all of it without any interruptions. Pretty good. Red Bull, no surprises there. And then on the exact same number of laps in joint fourth place, Aston Martin and Sauber, who actually achieved that despite an issue for Bottas on the final day, which kept him in the garage. Actually, things not looking too bad for this team. The livery does, but everything else, maybe they are cooking up something this year. Who knows? Having a lot of laps in testing shows that a team is confident in their data and in control of their car, an excellent platform for them building performance throughout the season. For me then, the biggest takeaway from testing is Ferrari look confident. Probably the car with the quickest single lap pace over the last 2 years. Hopefully, Ferrari are using this strong testing and strong development over the winter to convert some of that into strong race pace as well. We can't ignore, however, that Red Bull have also had a very strong testing. It doesn't matter if Ferrari have made progress over the winter if Red Bull have made the exact same progress. After testing, the magic 8 ball says Ferrari could be gaining slowly. Thankfully, we didn't have to wait long after testing this year to find out with our very own eyes just how close the pack is to Red Bull this year. Oh no. Oh God. Think of the children. So, yeah. It turns out no one was anywhere near Red Bull this year, which is ominous, but let's cast our minds back to this time last year, Bahrain 2023. 2023, where Red Bull also dominated that race to go on to dominate the whole season, and see if the competition is closer now or even further away. As I said before, Max drove a Grand Slam this weekend, basically the best weekend possible. If we look at those statistics from both years, it kind of looks like Max is getting even faster out in front. However, Max definitely could have led every lap last year. He led all but 3, which he only lost because he pitted before Perez. If Red Bull had just reversed the pit order, basically the same as this year, Max would have quite easily led the race start to finish. Fastest lap, on the other hand, was not in Max's reach last year. Red Bull went for a soft, hard strategy, which makes it basically impossible to get fastest lap if someone else puts on softs for their final stint. The fastest lap, in fact, went to Zhou, who pitted out of 13th 2 laps before the end just to get it. I presume the only reason they did this was that Alfa Romeo thought they would be fighting Sauber in the championship, and so every point counted. It turns out they were not. So Max looked actually a little bit stronger this year, if not very similar to last year, on his way to his 5th Grand Slam. But let's take a little look at the gaps to the cars behind. Both this year and last, P2 was won by Max's teammate Perez. Gap to P2 in 2023, 11.9. Gap to P2 in 2024, 22.4. Twice as dominant then. Well, Perez climbed into P2 this year on lap 11, where he was 9.6 seconds behind. At the same time, last year on lap 11, Perez was 9.5 seconds behind. If Max can pull the exact same lead in the first 10 laps, it kind of indicates he has the same advantage over his teammate and the rest of the field. However, last year he then held that gap at about 11 seconds, whereas this year he carried on pushing. The thing is though, it kind of didn't look like he was pushing either year. It looked like he could have won either one by 30 seconds plus, which is ominous. Gap to Perez aside, how about the gap to Ferrari? Ferrari are making themselves look like a clear second place this year. Obviously, the only team to take any wins off Red Bull last year, and still looking like they might be challenging for pole position every week. Charles Leclerc was in 3rd place last year until his engine did Ferrari things. 24 seconds behind on lap 39. If we extrapolate that time out based on Sainz's performance in the last laps of the race, we can predict he would have finished about 39 seconds behind Verstappen. This year, Sainz finished only 25 seconds behind. Only 25, that tiny number, 25 seconds. What this does seem to show us is a clear improvement by Ferrari on their race pace. Red Bull obviously still has the best pace on race day, but last year Ferrari regularly fell off, unable to manage their tyres, losing strong quali positions to Mercedes and McLaren behind. This year, it seems they've solved a lot of those issues. Perhaps already at a point where they can challenge Perez, however, still not quite enough for the Dutchman. A season is a long time though. If Ferrari can turn a P4 and a DNF last year into a win in Singapore, just think what they can do with a much stronger performance in Bahrain this year. After Bahrain 2024, the Magic 8 Ball says, Ferrari closer than last year. Speaking of developments over a season, we should probably talk about a concept that is overlooked in Formula 1. So often on F1 weekends, the media will focus on clearly visible new developments on a car, a new front wing, new side pod designs, a new edge to the floor, whatever. Then, if there is a change in fortunes for that race, let's say jumping from P10 to P6, all of that gain will be attributed to that one new part only. And then we're done. However, Formula 1 is a little bit more complicated than that, and change actually happens a lot more slowly. There's a lot of parts that affect how quick your car goes. Big jumps up the order are much more likely to be due to the fact that every track is different, and some tracks suit some teams more than others. This new part on the car may have gained the team a couple aero points, which is to say a couple hundredths of a second, but it's unlikely to change them from a back marker into a podium team. If we want to look at long-term development gains, we can look at one of my favourite ever graphs in Formula 1. Look at that. That is a beautiful graph. Basically, if we take every team's first car's average race pace for each race, bear with me, also known as their average lap time for all the green flag laps, divide that by the very fastest car's average race pace, and then show it as a percentage, because every track is different, we can plot a graph that looks like this. That's a bit up and down, because all the tracks are very different, in fact, so if we take a 5-race rolling average to smooth things out a bit, we get something that looks like this. Now, this graph is not perfect. Nothing is. When we see all of the teams bunch up, such as this, it should mean that everyone brought loads of nice new packages that brought them much closer to the leader. However, what it's much more likely to show is that actually the lead car just got held up for some reason and so wasn't driving to their full potential. Let's actually take the US Grand Prix last year as an example. What this should show is everyone getting closer after Qatar, but actually we have to remember that in this race, Verstappen started in P6 and then spent the first half of the race battling his way through some pretty strong McLarens, Mercedes and Ferraris to get to the front. They were quick enough to hold him up, causing some problems, but not quick enough ultimately to keep him behind. Verstappen's true pace, therefore, was hidden this weekend because he spent half the time in traffic. Had Max instead started P1 this weekend, this would not look so close. Looking long term though, this does show us some pretty significant changes over the season. We see Aston's meteoric rise at the start of the season before their gradual drop off as they didn't keep up with development. We see McLaren's slow start followed by their pretty significant surge throughout the season to become the clear P2 team for most of the second half. And we see Ferrari and Mercedes doing their best to basically just hang on 0.5% behind Red Bull. It's not easy. Now, obviously this graph kind of hides the winter breaks somewhat and makes it look like quite a significant jump for the race this weekend. If we instead scale this thing by date, it shallows that out a bit and you see that actually not much changes. And this is no different to any other year in Formula 1. The order normally just stays the same. For me, this graph is clear. Teams struggled to gain any ground at all against Red Bull last year, and considering all the teams have gone a little bit down over the winter this season means that Red Bull's had a pretty strong upgrade package to start 2024. Teams can and will move up and down. McLaren showed us that you can make some major changes throughout the season, but even if you can get to this point, that last 0.5%, that's the hard part. Ferrari and Mercedes both seem to be gaining in the second half of last year, similar to the way that Mercedes did in 2022. My prediction is Mercedes and McLaren are going to start this year, very similar to Mercedes last year, falling back slightly in the first half of the season with a late season charge, which basically just leaves us with Ferrari. All the data shows they look strong. I think they're going to continue getting closer to Red Bull, and once they get into that 0.2-ish% range, they might even be able to start challenging for wins. They're not there yet though, and they don't have all that long before Red Bull bring their first big package of the year planned for Imola, round 7. In conclusion, do I think Red Bull are going to win every single race this season? No. Ferrari are looking like they're in a much better place than this time last year, and I think they're going to continue to keep growing. While they're not there yet, and I don't expect Max to face any real challenges in the next couple months, I do believe that Ferrari could pull a win out the bag before summer shutdown. I do also think Mercedes or McLaren could win a couple races this year, but I don't really see that happening until the second half of the season. Will Red Bull win the Constructors' Championship? Literally only disqualification could stop them. Will Max Verstappen be their Drivers' Champion? You and I both know that's a very silly question, but along the way, I'm expecting a few wins for Sainz as he enters his villain era after being dropped. Maybe a win or two for Leclerc, but he does like to crash whenever he gets into the lead, so maybe not, I suppose. One of the Mercedes duo could pick up a shock one, similar to 2022, and then McLaren. Yeah, why not? Piastri gets his first win. That's my prediction. Norris P2. You heard it here first.